Robert Picardo, the holographic doctor from Star Trek Voyager, and Commander Woolsey from Stargate Atlantis. You're listening to Mike the Birdman and the rest of the Twig crew on This Week in Geek.net.
On screen.
The action-packed third season of Star Trek The Next Generation, along with its brilliant storytelling that elevated to an all-new level, was nominated for 9 Emmy Awards, including one for the brilliantly acclaimed episode, Yesterday's Enterprise.
This war's not supposed to be happening. You've got to send those people back to correct this.
I'm supposed to be dead.
Let's make sure that history never forgets the name. Enterprise.
Greetings, citizens of the Federation. It is I, Lieutenant Commander Mike the Birdman of the USS Future Imperfect. And as we travel away from Starbase into regions unknown, it is time to talk about one of our favorite sci-fi franchises, because Future Imperfect is the show generally dedicated to Star Trek, but we also talk about other sci-fi properties as well. But I'm not alone as I travel amongst the stars. And joining me from the city of Kitchener, Ontario, Canada, I am joined with...
Alex, and am I your first mate?
You're my first officer. You're my first.
Yeah, okay, that works. Am I a lieutenant commander then?
Well, if I'm Lieutenant Commander, yeah, we'd probably be about the same rank. But let's just say I greased a few palms to get where I needed to be.
You have time in service. You have time in service.
That works. And that other voice you are hearing is our lovely science officer in more ways than one from the great wilds of Michigan, maybe Vulcan.
I'm Aaron Pollyea.
So yes, guys, we are back here on Future Imperfect, and in this episode of the show,
Happy New Year, happy late January when we were supposed to be recording.
Obviously we fell into some kind of a time dilation rift. The Guardian of Forever said, "Hey, guess what? Now you're back." So yes, we are back here on Future Imperfect, which we will be doing more of these because we got a lot to say about Star Trek over the next coming months as Star Trek Picard is airing. Lower Decks is coming back later on this year. Strange New World's going to be airing in just a couple of weeks, and we have a lot of cool stuff to talk about. But,
also known as Star Trek: The Great Last Hope. Is that what we're saying?
Who knows? Yeah. I mean, I'm optimistic about Strange New Worlds, but we'll see.
I will like Pike. They better not screw him up, because if they screw him up, then there's no hope.
Yeah, so we will wait and see. So anyway, here on this edition of the show, we are going to be talking about Star Trek The Next Generation Season 3. And when we've done these typical season picks, our rules are very, very, very simple. You must pick an episode from the chosen season, in this case, Season 3, and you are not allowed to pick anything that is like, oh, it's best of both worlds, it's reunification, stuff like that.
You can't pick the ones that the layman viewer would know of. Right?
Yeah.
The ones that are like, you can't pick the most famous, and we're not supposed to pick things like double part season finales, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so this season was a little more challenging because there was a lot of really good episodes in this. And while I was doing my research, I could have picked another episode here, but I didn't. And we'll talk about my pick a little bit later. So we're going to start things off to the XO's chair. And we're going to throw things over to Alex, and he's going to give us a little bit of a mission brief from Steve Megatron Phillips, who's currently away on shore leave, mostly because we couldn't get the schedule lined up for him, but he will be rejoining us in the future for more of these season debriefs.
Yeah,
so
there are these darn things called time zones that are kind of, that actually might be, well, I guess some people want to obliterate them, but it kind of causes this rift where we're in the past and he's in the future, right? Or is he in the past? We're in the future. That's what it is.
He's in the past. Yeah,
that's correct. So that's why it doesn't always work. But he had picked one, and that was Deja Q, which I decided, hey, you know what? He can't be here. I should at least watch this. I'm pretty sure Aaron knows it by heart.
Believe it or not, I know this whole season by heart. I've probably seen every episode in this season dozens of times.
Oh, wow.
And there's a few in this season that I obviously have seen probably close to a dozen. And funny enough, this is probably one that I had at some point, but I didn't remember most of it when I went back to watch it. So Deja Q is the 13th episode. So it's the, I guess, mid-season episode, right in the smack dab in the middle. And this, I'm not going to probably get the names of the aliens correct, but it starts out with the Enterprise trying to help this alien race, and they look kind of like not fish people, but like something you would have seen out of like the Outer Limits, I guess. And they're having a problem where their moon is dangerously going off course, and it's going to cause irreparable damage to their planet, maybe ice age or extinction level event. And the Enterprise is there to try to help find a solution to either tractor beam or push or pull or do something that will divert the moon to put it back into a proper orbit so that it's not going to cause problems for these people, because it's either that or disaster will strike, because they probably can't evacuate most of them, and still it's disaster. And right when they're just about to get started on trying to figure out what they can do, Q shows up completely naked, floating in space, in the air, on the bridge, a la, I guess, like Terminator. And no, one thing I found funny, nobody looks at his junk. They're just looking at his face. Just like, what are you doing here? Nobody asks him why he's naked. He's just there. And he announces that he's been kicked out of the continuum and that he has no powers. He's mortal. And when they asked him, they said, you're out. You have to pick a form. He blurted out human without thinking is what he said. And so they sent him to the Enterprise, I guess, simply because they're like, what's one of the humans that he's dealt with? And they just, blah. They drop him off. And the rest of the episode is about him coming to terms with what it's like to be a human, which has some funny moments, figuring out that he's hungry, what that even is, what pain is,
that he fell asleep and he was terrified of that.
He was terrified. He's like, I lost consciousness and I thought I was dying. What's going on? They're like, you fell asleep. And he's like, it's horrible. How do you deal with that? You're like just having exhaustion for the first time, and not knowing he doesn't know what food it really does for you, or how, what to eat, what he would like. So him hanging out with Data was really cool. And he's told that, chocolate is what I think it's Troy likes to eat when she's sad, ice cream chocolate sundae. So he orders 10 because he's like, I've never eaten before. I'm probably really hungry. It's one of the few episodes that has a lot of jokes in it that actually hit, and they're not like dad jokey. They actually are pretty well written and clever. And it's one of the episodes where a formerly omnipotent being learns to be human from Data, who is not human whatsoever. So it's one of those episodes. And we go yada yada yada. He decides to do a selfless act to save the ship, even though he doesn't really consciously know that's what he's doing. He's just like, well, if they're going to kill me anyway, I may as well leave them alone, get away from them so that they won't die. And in his head, he doesn't realize that he's being selfless till another Q shows up. Is this the first time we saw another Q?
I think so, actually.
Yeah.
Because the other Q shows up and he's like, hi, Q. And then you realize that they're all called Q. And I'm forgetting who was the guest. It was Corbin Bernsen that played. It's weird seeing him with hair. I forgot that he had hair.
What a weird idea for a Q. Because I know him from Major League. I never would have pictured him as an omnipotent being.
This is when he was on LA Law, so he had hair, which is weird. But yeah, I was like, I know that actor. And there's a good interaction with Whoopi Goldberg. I think this is the second time that they interacted with each other. And she just basically mocks him. and when Q says to everybody that everybody's having a hard time believing that I'm mortal, so she just stabs him with a fork. And she's like, he seems mortal to me. So like,
it's kind of awful of her, honestly.
It is. This is the one time I've seen her where she's petty. And now I don't know if at this point if they were trying to hint at maybe doing more into her backstory eventually, but I don't think it ever gets further than this with their relationship.
Yeah, not really. We just know that there has been something in the past with
over
them
the last several hundred years. There's been contention between her and him specifically, and her race and his race.
Yeah, which says something about the Allurians. Who knows?
Exactly. So it's something that I would love them to explore, but I don't know if they would now. But still, I thought that was cool. And through his selfless act, he gets his wings back. An angel gets his wings, and he gives Data a gift because Data actually saved him from dying when an alien race came to exact its revenge against him because, as we all know, Q has made lots of enemies, and him turning human and going to Picard was actually, a thinly veiled selfish act because he thought he needed protection, which he obviously did. Well, Data saves him. Data is always talking about how he wishes he could experience emotion, so he leaves him with a parting gift, which is he gives him a deep and hearty belly laugh, which he's never experienced before.
Which is where this infamous GIF on Twitter has come from.
Yes, and but he lets him have the laugh, but doesn't seem to, when it's over, give him the ability to process what it was, because he doesn't have that.
He doesn't have the emotional capability to understand where laughter comes from.
No, he doesn't know where it came from, but it is an experience that he's finally had.
Yeah,
and that's the first time that we get to see that from him, which was it's a good gift. And then I guess as one final gift to the rest of them, he does what does he changes the gravitational constant of the universe to fix the rotation of that, or the change the gravitational pull or something of that moon.
Well, what he does is he just kind of puts the moon back.
He was telling them that their way to solve it would be like to change the universe.
Yeah, well, he's like, well, if I was just the Q, if I still had my powers, I would change the gravitational constant of the universe so I could move the asteroid. And the thing that I really like about this episode is that it does set up how subspace fields seemingly work, part of how they work, because they obviously adjust space-time. So, putting this subspace field over the asteroid to reduce its mass is actually really important for later tech type stuff in Star Trek.
Yeah, like they took something that was like wild sci-fi fantasy almost, in just his explanation of, well, you just change the universe to make this thing move. And then the writers found a way to make it something somewhat realistic when they're like, Geordi's like, hey, well, what if we just scale it down to change the universe around this one object instead of the universe at large?
And it makes sense. It makes sense using the warp drive the way they did.
And this is also the episode, Michael, where the gift comes from of John Delancey showing up with the mariachi band.
Yeah, I thought so.
It's also Picard facepalm.
So many memorable moments out of this episode.
Steve picked a good episode. It's one of the good Q episodes for sure. And then do you want to just move on to mine, or anybody else have any other thoughts specifically for this one?
I think it's really cool when you let John Delancey off the chain, he's a guy who really knows how to liven up a scene with whoever he's in. I think whoever he's acting in the scene with, he really brings them up. Like, obviously I knew John Delancey from Star Trek, but some of the other roles I've seen him in, and this will tie into some of my other fandoms, is when he played Discord on My Little Pony. There are elements of Q in his performance, how he's this omnipotent weird being who can do whatever he wants whenever he wants. So My Little Pony had their own Q.
I was gonna say, it's obvious why they did that for that show, because they're doing it for the fans there. But where I see his character shine through, where he has a similar way about him, is, did either of you ever see the TV show Legend that ran for 1 year in the 90s?
Never heard of it.
It aired back to back with Voyager when Voyager launched on UPN, and it's a show in the late Old West, like the 1870s or 1880s, starring Richard Dean Anderson right before he got the gig doing Stargate, and he plays a writer that writes all these like pulp novels of the West. Made up all these extravagant things about what things he did, but really they're just fake stories. Well, he gets eventually tricked into having to help people. Basically, it's like MacGyver, but back then. Obviously, he was just finishing on MacGyver when he did this. And he's partnered with an inventor friend, played by John Delancey, who's like a Doc Brown mad scientist in the 1800s. And they use his weird inventions to solve mysteries and crimes. And sometimes there's like supernaturally type stuff that happen. And it ran for, I think, 12 or 15 episodes. And it's on DVD. And it's basically, what if Q didn't have his powers, but had his brain in the 1800s?
Okay.
I will send it to you guys to check out. because he did that right before, I guess, getting more and more gigs on Voyager. So yeah, like it is good. And also, one thing to note, he's one of the rare Star Trek characters that can be silly and goofy, where you would normally be like, oh, this is cringe, but at the same time, you're never not on edge. You're always worried about, there's always some sort of sinister thing happening even when he's being goofy, which is not an easy tone to pull off. So when he's dancing with the mariachi band, you're always there worrying, like, in the next second, is he going to transport you into space somewhere? Is he just going to snap his fingers and you're back in court?
It's because Q doesn't have human morality.
No.
So you don't know what the hell's going to happen.
He is the epitome of the internet term, just do it for the lulz. He does it because he thinks it's funny. And in that episode, he mentions that with the other Q talking to him, the other Q is, all the Q Continuum is mad at him because he's tormenting so many people that when they go to observe and appear, sometimes just benevolently to races, they have to spend hours trying to appease and explain to people that not all Q are like him. And that's why he was being punished, because he was an annoyance to them, because he's basically like a Loki. He's a little trickster shit. So yeah, that was good. Now, moving on to my episode, I picked yesterday's Enterprise. And interestingly enough, I picked that episode because I remembered it being good, but I didn't remember if it was the episode I thought it was.
Really?
And it was not the episode I thought it was. I thought it was the episode. I might have even got a movie confused, but I thought it was an episode that had Frasier as the Enterprise captain.
Oh no, that's when he's on oh god, why can't I think of the name?
Isn't it?
Which is exactly, I'm so far off, but then at the same time I'm technically not that far off. because Undiscovered Country kind of ties into this episode in a roundabout way. Mm-hmm. So I ended up watching this and I went, oh shit, I picked the wrong episode, but actually I didn't. I picked a good episode regardless. I went, it's not the one with the captain is Frasier. That's either the movie or whatever. It's the one where they bring back Tasha Yar to give her a proper send off. And
yeah, you were thinking of Cause and Effect from season 5.
Okay, so yes, I see what I mean. There's so many good episodes that I was like, oh, it's because I saw the name and I'm like, oh, that's the one. Well, anyway, I picked the Tasha Yar episode where they did her so dirty in the first season, and we've seen the tweets and everything about how Rick Berman tried to brush under the rug how contentious he was with her until she explained that no, I left the show kind of because you were an asshole. But anyway, this is one of my favorite types of episodes, which are the parallel universes, alternate histories. That's my jam for the most part, or that and ones where there's time loops, that sort of stuff. So this is a time, I guess, alteration episode done well, unlike Picard season 2. Anyway, this episode starts out
true enough.
This episode starts out with the Enterprise approaching some weird anomaly in space, as is the norm, and it starts with one of my favorite one-liner jokes that has become sort of a meme in itself, and that is Guinan is sitting down with Worf and talking to him about his love life and telling him, hey, there's a plenty of women on this ship that would totally be down to clown with you. And he's like, no, even though he's clearly embarrassed to ask, he's just like, no, I'm afraid that they, wouldn't be able to handle me. And all this, like, it's just weird dialogue, but it is kind of funny and cute. And she's like, drink this. He's like, what is it? She goes, drink it. He drinks it, loves whatever the drink is. And she's like, it's prune juice. And he goes, prune juice, a warrior's drink. And that to me, I laugh every time I see it, as stupid as that is.
Now, didn't they carry that joke into DS9?
Yeah.
I thought so.
Yeah, he drinks prune juice. Like that's his drink of like choice when it's non-alcoholic.
Well, it makes him be able to teach the toilet who's boss really well.
pretty much. It's like,
I'm regular, damn it, for Kalis.
He drinks that, and then his body goes to war with itself, and then eventually it wins.
Exactly.
Food isn't digesting. I need my warrior's drink.
And FYI, this is arguably my favorite episode of season 3.
Oh yeah, so you would have probably picked it if I hadn't, sort of thing.
Yeah. This is, to me, one of the most interesting episodes that has a very long-term effect on the franchise overall.
Well, this is the closest at this point that we had gotten to a mirror universe, because it's not really a mirror universe. This is a what if episode more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
And they go to, suddenly they pass through an event horizon, and Guinan is the only one that seems to feel any changes. And again, adding to a bit of the lore about her species, where they can sense something with messed up with time travel and all this sort of stuff, which I forget, did they address that in Picard now so far? I can't remember.
No.
Kinda, maybe.
I could go into like an hour-long explanation of the weirdness of the time travel issues in Picard, but
okay, well,
so let's not.
We'll select that. I was going to say, but this is an interesting aspect of her species that I guess this is technically addressed in Generations, the movie, right? She can both understand, she perceives time differently than a lot of other species, in that she can understand what's happening with it. She can comprehend the nexus both inside and out, what's happening at the same time, that it's not happening, and all yada yada yada.
Yeah, but we also don't know if it's a feature of her entire species either.
Yeah, that's true. It could just be her because of her exposures or whatever. But regardless, it adds a bit to her mystique that there has to be somebody. She doesn't know what's wrong, but that something is wrong, and things start to slowly come to her as she's experiencing them. Immediately, the show shifts. Like, it's like a light switch went off, and it looks like Discovery in the lighting, and obviously not really the same lens flares, but everything switches from a bright flat lighting to a very shadowy blue lit almost sinister action looking show, because the Enterprise is now a warship. It is not an exploratory scientific vessel. And the first thing we're alerted to, other than all their uniforms changing to be a little more militaristic, a much better design in my mind than what we saw in the Mirror Universe in the original series. And we obviously don't see Worf, and we see Tasha Yar on the bridge. And you're like, oh, what just happened? A what? And we find out that what they encountered was they didn't go through the rift necessarily. The Event Horizon, the Enterprise C pulls through, right? It's a C, yes. The Enterprise C pulls through, which has been was destroyed 22 years ago, I think they said. And whatever happened, it leaving the timeline changed everything. At the time that it was there were peace treaties being signed, which is how it's connected, I guess, to Undiscovered Country, right? Wasn't that around the time when they were signing the peace treaties?
No.
That was the Kittimer, like basically.
Because I'm off by like 60 years, right?
So the battle of it's the Battle of Narendra 3, actually, that Enterprise C was at, and that's actually in 2344. But the point of the episode, do you want me to talk about it, Alex, or do you want to?
Yeah, basically they in the correct line of our timeline, they went to a distress signal at a Klingon outpost that I think they were in negotiations with or something. They were going to help them, and they were under Romulan attack. And in the correct timeline, or in our prime timeline, they died defending the Klingons, and the Klingons viewed that as a very honorable death, and that led to eventually that's a key moment leading to our alliance with them, and then obviously because of that, Worf joining Starfleet and so forth.
Yeah, that's what brought peace between the Federation and the Klingons, formal peace.
Yeah, there have been an uneasy whatever, and then they viewed that as, hey, they sacrificed themselves against a much stronger enemy for us.
Exactly, and that the Battle of Narendra 3 would end up going down in history as one of the most important events between the Klingons and the Federation, as well as being an important event in solidifying the fact that the Klingons and the Romulans are going to be hostile to each other more so than the Federation and
Yeah,
Romulans are.
and obviously with the might of the Klingon Empire and us, it's what's kept that Cold War sort of going with the Romulans.
Yeah, and then that also affects the whole Battle of Narendra 3, affects the Star Trek Adventures book series for the RPG, because in the Shackleton Expanse, the Federation starbase that was co-built with the Klingon Empire is called Narendra Station after this cooperative battle that occurred.
And getting back to giving Tasha Yar a proper send off, she encounters a few people. She encounters the crew of the Enterprise that's there. First, they're worried about telling them anything about them being out of time because it might, alter or cause problems. But then they determine that, hey, that ship was probably supposed to die because even in this altered universe, Picard still has such a good relationship with Guinan that he trusts her instincts. Like if Guinan is telling him things are off and wrong, she doesn't lie.
Mm-hmm.
So something's off and wrong. And in this process, Tasha sees and sort of falls in love with I think he's the lieutenant. I don't know if he's the number one or if he is a senior bridge crew member of the Enterprise C, and she falls for him and they get along really well. And it's
Christopher McDonald, right?
Yeah, Shooter, whatever.
Shooter McGavin.
Yeah.
I eat pieces of shit like you for breakfast.
Yeah.
Of shit for breakfast.
By the way, he looked 45 even when he was in his 20s.
Yeah, that man is immortal. He's essentially a Soong type android because he doesn't age.
Well, he looks a little older now, but he basically looks the same. And in the process, she's having lunch with him, and Guinan comes in. Guinan looks spooked, like she's seen a ghost, because she kind of has. And Tasha realizes that she's the only one that, out of all the bridge crew, that Guinan seems spooked by. And then she starts to put two and two together, like when they start to realize that, hey, if they go back, our timeline could be changed. People might not even be here. And she's like, I have to find out. Why are you freaking out whenever you see me? And Guinan's like, because you're not supposed to be here. She's like, where am I supposed to be? She's like, you're supposed to be dead, which, by the way, is pretty harsh to say too. But all in all, she ends up deciding, hey, I'm going to see if I can go serve on that ship, because the captain of the ship in the process is attacked by the Klingons because, as we mentioned, they're at war with the Federation. The Federation is losing. Picard reveals that it's entirely possible that within 6 months, the Federation either will not exist or be subjugated. They've lost so much ground. So in this process, the captain of that ship gets hurt. And by the way, when that captain gets hurt, there is like a saw blade sticking out of her head.
Yeah, Rachel Garrett catches it hard.
Like this is one of the most bloody episodes I think they ever did in the show, with the
outside of the exploding alien, yeah.
Which I still love for how stupid that was, but this was like very realistic.
It's so bloody that the amount of crew that are on this Ambassador class Enterprise, there are so many people killed on it that Shooter McGavin, his character, is actually a lieutenant junior grade, and he's in command of that ship.
Yeah, he's only I think he was only out of the academy a couple of years.
And he's the highest ranking officer left.
That is insane to think about. The command structure had been decimated that badly.
Why do you think Yar had to go with?
Yeah, and then Yar is like, and they obviously profess that they're attracted to each other, and that there's an attraction for sure there. And he says, hey, if we do survive this, who knows? Because they also don't know. Like, they realize that sending them back, it's entirely possible that they won that battle in that timeline. They don't know that they're supposed to lose, because they're like, hey, well, if they won, then obviously this could change everything here, or they lose and it could change everything here. We don't know if he lived. And he's like, hey, if you ever go back to Earth and you see a guy in his late 50s,
let's hang out.
Maybe come over and say hi. And that's you can see that they're gonna miss each other. And then she goes, okay, hey, maybe can I go serve on the ship? I'm not supposed to be here. Guinan told me this. And he's like, or sorry, Picard goes, Guinan told you you're dead? Well, obviously that's a pretty drastic thing. Okay, fine, you can go serve, because again, the trust is in Guinan there that Guinan's not going to send them astray. So she goes over to give them a fighting chance, because obviously they had changed so much with having the captain die. The captain was supposed to be there to give tactical commands and everything. They'd have no chance. So even a couple seconds longer of surviving might be what they need to correct the timeline. So Tasha goes over, gets to say her goodbye. It was mentioned by Guinan, and this is clearly in reaction to how the fans reacted and actors and everybody. Guinan says that I don't know the details of your death other than it was empty. It was an empty, pointless death. And that was directly addressing how, like, she just dies mid-season. And people are like, what?
And it's a gut punch.
Yeah.
It really is a gut punch to her.
And nowadays, it, like, since like Game of Thrones and Sopranos and that, it is normal to expect the unexpected and have a main cast member just get killed randomly in an episode. But that was not the case 30 years ago. Like, you didn't kill, unless it was a season finale or something, you didn't kill a cast member. So they killed her off randomly. And so they addressed it here. And she's like, hey, if I'm going to die, I want my death to have meaning for everybody. So she says her goodbyes, and then she passes through the event horizon with them. As she's passing through, we get to see a lot of the Enterprise cast members die. And we see Riker die, and he has a gash about an inch wide in his neck, and he's bled out. And watching it on the Blu-ray, I was like, holy crap, at least this would have been more blurry on regular TV when it aired. But like, it was an excuse for them to get to show deaths of some of the crew members and what it would be like. What would it be like if we were at war with the Klingons, if we hadn't come to peace with them? And the answer is everybody's going to die. So we see that, and then at flash of light, we're back on the bridge where everything was at the beginning. Only difference now is Guinan calls the captain and says, is everything okay? Is anything? He's like, yeah, everything's fine. And she goes, okay. Yeah, no, Captain, everything's fine. And then she sits down with Geordi and just asks, tell me about Tasha Yar. And that's how the episode ends. So they did, this was a way to rectify what they did to her.
Yes. And it has ramifications all the way through the franchise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because the events of this lead to Tasha Yar being captured by the Romulans.
Yeah.
And then her daughter being a part of later seasons.
Yep. So like this was very well. This is how you do an alternate timeline or a time travel or a loop episode or a mirror. This is kind of the blueprint and how you do it right. Because, because almost everything gets tied up in a bow. It doesn't leave a lot of loose things. It leaves a couple threads, again, that they could use maybe later on, because they don't directly address the fate of the Enterprise C.
Because that's always been a weird part of the apocrypha for Star Trek. Especially, I was actually watching a video on Trek Culture the other day, which is a YouTube channel, and they were mentioning you don't really know a lot about the Enterprise C, and I actually did a little bit of digging on this on Memory Alpha, and not so much a Memory Beta because that's B canon, so it doesn't really count. I think the Enterprise C was only in service for less than 10 years. It wasn't very long.
Well, yeah. And isn't, now, again, correct me if I'm wrong, was this the first time they showed that the captain of an Enterprise was a woman?
A woman, yes. And Rachel Garrett had worked her way up, and she had only been in command of the Enterprise C for about 4 years prior to her dying in this episode. Again, really interesting stuff. And I would love to see a Trek show explore this era, because there's so much history that hasn't been discussed between the Encounter and Farpoint. Yeah, like we just don't really know a lot. I mean, there may be throwaway lines, but that's it.
Yeah, we call it like the Lost Era.
Yeah.
It's just between Star Trek 6 and Encounter at Farpoint, where your primary starship is Excelsior classes up until the ambassadors start
'Cause
coming off out of the shipyards.
I guess we get like a brief glimpse for the first like 5 minutes of Generations, right? And that's it.
Yeah, because that's an
Yeah.
Excelsior class. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a modified Excelsior class. It's I even at least I call it a subclass because it is different from other Excelsiors.
It's an
Later
Excelsior
on-
refit, right?
Not really, because we see two different types of Excelsiors going through the Dominion War.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is the standard Excelsior. The other one is this Enterprise subclass.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because the Enterprise subclass doesn't have like these fins on the back, and it has an extra impulse deck. I know I'm getting into the nitty gritty details, but we do see these two different Excelsiors out there, even in the Dominion War.
One of the fun little bits of trivia for those kids who grew up in the 1990s, a lot of footage from this particular episode was used in the Star Trek The VHS board game. When the Klingon captures the Enterprise D because you're docked to some starbase and he steals the Enterprise, the shots of the Enterprise being destroyed by the Klingon birds of prey come from this particular episode. So that's a little bit of trivia for you.
I should mention that one little thing too. Maybe, I don't know if it was a slip or if it was purposeful, but everybody refers to Tasha as Lieutenant Yard or Tasha, but the Shooter McGavin character, as he's originally going to be leaving her after they spent time together and they have their kiss together, he calls her Natasha. He calls her like by a full name. So,
yes,
and I think that's the only time that she's ever called Natasha in the show. So
it is. I would always Tasha's kind of like a diminutive. It depends on a lot of times in Slavic cultures there's diminutive of names, and I'm sorry if I'm like babbling about this, but like Vladimir would be Vova, or I'm trying to think of others. Misha instead of Mikhail is, it would go to Misha. So yeah. Tasha is a diminutive of Natasha. It would be her proper name would be Natasha.
Yeah, I just found it interesting that it was that was how intimate they got, that he was talking to her with her proper name.
Yes,
that maybe she prefers Tasha or professionally whatever, but in private. Yeah, so I thought that was neat. So that's my episode. I like it. It's one of the ones you can watch. You don't have to have seen the rest of the show, but I wouldn't necessarily introduce it as one of the first episodes for somebody, because there is a lot more to it if you've watched the first season at least.
Sure.
So who's next?
That would be Aaron.
Oh, geez. Okay, so I'm going to talk about mine fairly quickly because a lot of it is talky. There's a lot of talking. There's a lot of diplomacy in it because I'm going to talk about the episode called Sarek. And I think it is an incredibly important episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, in that it is the time that we get to see Sarek again. We've seen Sarek many times in Star Trek. We've seen him once in the original series. We've seen him a couple times in the movies, in the original series movies. We clearly know that Sarek is a very important person in the Federation. It's more than just that he is the Vulcan ambassador to the Federation. He seems to be the ambassador plenipotentiary. He seems to be this guy that just goes everywhere and represents the Federation overall because he is so well known as a peacemaker.
And Spock's dad, obviously.
And he's Spock's dad. Okay, yes, fair enough. But that's, to me, the fact that he is Spock's father is only important when you're trying to deal with the relationship that he does not have with Spock. Because Sarek and Spock have never gotten along.
No, it's mentioned in the episode that Picard met him once at Spock's wedding.
Yes, at Spock's wedding.
Yeah, but they don't even refer to him as Spock. They just say at his son's wedding.
Yes, and we know from the original series Journey to Babel that their relationship is not a good one, to say the least. He tends to have a relationship with his human mother, Amanda Grayson, far more than Sarek. But here we don't actually see Amanda Grayson, because Amanda Grayson was human, and she was kind of a middle-aged woman in the 2260s.
Yeah, she'd be
So
hella dead.
yeah, she'd be like 150, 160 years old at this point. So obviously she has passed on, and Sarek has remarried to another human woman named Perrin.
Which shows obviously that he has a preference. He likes, whether it doesn't seem to be just for the sake of diplomacy, that he's like, oh, it makes sense for his ambassadorship to be married to a human. No, he likes human women.
I think it is not, it never has been diplomacy. That Sarek tends to do the Vulcan thing of trying to ignore emotions and say that he doesn't have them, but ends up falling in love with people that he feels compliments him. And so Amanda Grayson was one of those women, and Perrin clearly is, that she cares where he can't care, or he can't show that he cares. That he understands that he has to be a certain person, and therefore needs to have somebody around him that can compliment him. Maybe I'm putting a little too much into this, but obviously I enjoy Sarek as a character, so seeing him, and being played by Mark Leonard, the original actor, coming back to reprise his role, love it. Okay, so he's coming back onto the ship because he is going to be doing he's going to be working on diplomacy with a species known as Ligarians. And he comes on board, and it turns out that he is suffering from, let's say, a degenerative mental illness. This isn't really made clear at first, but what is happening is that his madness that is being held back by Vulcan mind melds and things like that is slowly leaking out into the crew. And it's causing the crew to have heightened emotions. Now, a lot of people at this point who are just either mild Star Trek fans or don't really know a ton about Vulcans is that they go, well, Vulcans are not emotional. This doesn't really make sense. That's not true. Vulcans actually have far more emotions than humans do. It's just that they have learned to repress them because those emotions have gotten them into problems in their distant past.
Vulcans with emotions tend to be like violent, psychopathic Romulans.
They're Romulans. That's exactly what happened in their past, was this break between those that followed logic and those that served underneath the quote unquote Raptor's wings. And that's where that rift came from, where the Romulans finally left after Vulcan was bombarded by nuclear weapons. I think it's in the 4th century AD. Like, it's crazy. Anyway, Vulcans feel very deeply, and they have learned to suppress those emotions. Those emotions do tend to come out at certain points in their life, like during Pon farr, where they just become murderous assholes. But you can only hold it back so far. Unfortunately, Sarek is suffering from a mental disability, where
it
go
seems
ahead.
to be. Is it one of the first times that, because this episode would have been 1990, this would have been on the frontier of when we started discovering what Alzheimer's and dementia was.
I was about to say, yeah, like while I was watching this, I watched my own mother and father degenerate from dementia, and I didn't expect this episode to hit as hard as it did. And when Picard's talking to Sarek's wife, and she's like, please let him have his dignity. He needs to do this so he can retire with honor. I think back very much to watching my father in his final years. He didn't remember who I was, and we didn't end on the greatest terms, unfortunately, and that is what it is. But I remember, this is a guy who used to take me fishing. This is a guy who taught me how to tie my own shoes. And this is a guy who raised me for essentially 30 plus years of my life, and he didn't recognize me anymore. And I thought to kind of put myself into Sarek's space, to be a guy who's been a part of galactic politics, shaping the very history of the Federation, the very laws and policies that it follows, to probably helping consult on articles of the Federation. And to be weakened in that state must have been devastating. And for a guy who's supposed to be in charge of his emotions all the time, I can only imagine what those other Vulcans were doing when they mind melded with him to feel those emotions, to feel those memories in him. That
to
is
take on the responsibility of having those emotions so Sarek can continue his work, like sacrificing themselves because they respect and maybe even love Sarek that much.
Yeah, like it's sad. And
yeah, like I looked and this wasn't like, people knew about Alzheimer's, but people say old timers or he's just getting old. It wasn't really until the early to mid 80s that Alzheimer's became into the regular lexicon of like the common person. So this was still a pretty new thing, and they found a way to deal with it without overtly saying, he's losing his mind. No, he's having struggles controlling his faculties.
What's also important here is that Picard ends up having to take on that responsibility himself. So the negotiations can continue. And you have this amazing scene with Picard. Well, Sarek has to mind meld with Picard for this to happen. So there's a piece of Sarek left inside Picard. And there's the scene of Picard just screaming with emotion, crying, weeping, lashing out, unable to handle the levels of emotion that he feels from Sarek.
Having a full-blown panic attack.
Yeah, it's more than just a panic attack. It's because it is, but it's also this inability to deal with how much Sarek feels. This inner turmoil that all Vulcans go through.
And that was, countered with a minute earlier, Riker talking to Sarek after the negotiations saying, how's everything going? And Sarek calling him number one because a part of Picard is in him too. And
yes.
So he doesn't even think of commander or being proper. He just calls him number one a few times. And Riker, you can see he's like, okay. And he says, and how is Picard? He's fine. Like, not realizing what part of him was left, what it was doing to him. And then you jump to it, and he's with Beverly, and he's blurting out. He barely get the words out. He's like, I can't control it. And then she just says, don't. And then lets him cry on her. Like, I think this is the first time we saw Picard ever cry on the show and be truly human and vulnerable.
Yes. And it's a powerful moment for me. I don't know why. It really hit me seeing Picard completely lose it. But it connected into what Sarek was feeling, what he has to go through all the time, and how his mind had been slowly deteriorating and making it unable for him to deal with it.
And it shows how trusting and how deep his relationship with Beverly has been. Mm-hmm. That she's, regardless if she was his doctor or not, this would never leave the room. How he handled it was always going to just be there. So she's like, you can let it out. Just let it out.
And it's not Troy as ship's counselor there either. No, think about that.
But also, if it was Troy, I don't know if she could have handled it.
Yeah,
because
you're right.
It would have projected onto her, and it could have been disastrous for both of them.
Now, also remember the events of this episode, since Sarek mind melded with Picard, have reverberations later on to the two-parter unification.
Yeah.
When Spock mind melds with Picard to understand the feelings that his father did have for him. Yeah. To have some sort of closure after Sarek has already been gone.
And that's hinted here because at the end, when they're leaving the ship and Picard is back to normal, he has a moment to speak with Sarek's wife, and he says, he loves you very deeply. And she just says, I know.
He doesn't need to say that. Yeah.
No, he doesn't need to say it. She knew her husband. And, but that, even if he was never going to say it to her, Picard felt the need to mention like that. She didn't even need to hear it though. She knew. So
It's an amazing episode. It really is. I highly recommend it. That's all I can say about it. Like,
yeah, it's just a good singularly contained character piece.
It's a good character study, and it's, I don't know. Like I said, it's one of those things. If you approach it with an open mind, and especially if you have experience with any person in your life who's experiencing this deteriorating mental facilities or faculties, sorry, it can really hit you. Surprisingly, so if you feel like Troy, you're gonna feel this one, and you're gonna maybe call your folks if they're still around, and just gotta let them know. So I guess with that out of the way, let's go to mine, who's definitely, I wouldn't call mine the happiest episode, but it's an interesting character piece for Data.
You have one of the episodes that I feel people who've never seen Star Trek but know of it through memes, they're like, oh, this is the most Star Trek of Star Trek episodes.
What I like about this one is when I used to watch Star Trek The Next Generation, I used to have Pirate Satellite growing up. And this was an episode I caught randomly on a Sunday morning when I was in elementary school, and I knew how to hack the satellite dish. I was a very clever kid. And the episode is called The Most Toys, with guest star Saul Rubinek. And I know him mostly from an episode of Masters of Horror, which was a Showtime show that ran in the mid 2000s, and he was in an episode called The Washingtonians, where he played a historian or a professor of some type who discovered that the founding fathers of America were cannibals. It's very strange. Entertaining, but strange.
And for listeners that are maybe a bit younger or not Canadian, where you probably have seen him, he's older, but he's one of the main characters in the show that ran for 6 or 7 years, I think, on the Sci-Fi Network, Warehouse 13.
Yes, and he was also, I think he was Daphne's boyfriend on Frasier for a couple episodes, I think.
Yeah, as far as like modern stuff, that's probably where you know. And if you're a Western fan, he's the writer on Unforgiven.
Oh.
Yeah, which is probably one of the bigger Westerns of the 90s, right?
So
yeah.
the setup for the episode is the Enterprise D has met up with this trader named Kivas Fajo, and Kivas Fajo is a trader of all unique and rare and strange things. So there's a Federation colony that has suffered a contamination of their water supply, which has contaminated it with some kind of an arsenic, and the only way to cure it on a much larger scale is to get this rare element. So Data is on their ship, and he's preparing one of the shuttlecraft. He's going through the pre-flight check. He's saying, okay, we have all this item, whatever, and then he gets stunned. And before that happens, one of Kivas's crew scans him and goes, okay, we need so many this of tripolymer, we need so many of this metal, so many of this. And you're thinking, well, why the hell? Why? So they send the ship out of the dock, and it blows up. And Worf is like, Data, and everybody on the ship is like, what the hell just happened? And Kivas calls over like, wow, pilot error, that must suck, gotta go. And it turns out they've kidnapped Data because Kivas is this guy who wants unique items across the galaxy. He's got Van Gogh's Starry Night. He has all these other rare things.
He's basically the collector from the Marvel movies.
Yeah, he wants this. So he decides he wants the only sentient android in the entire galaxy. And he's going to brag to his friends about it. So he basically kidnaps Data, and it turns out his ship is full of slaves. And there's this woman named Varia who says, if you listen and if you please him, he'll reward you. But if you don't, he will visit unimaginable horrors upon you and everybody that you love. So I really suggest you play nice. And Kivas is like, okay, Data, I want you to sit in this chair. No. And I want you to wear this suit. Double no. He's like, well, tell you what, you don't believe it now, but you're going to do everything I say because your programming wants you to do it. He's like, well, I have no reason to listen to you. I'm going to do everything in my power to escape. He's like, okay, and you're going to try, and you're going to fail. And if you do try to escape, people are going to suffer. So I leave you with this choice. You're going to pick which option you dislike the least. And he throws a vat of acid on him and says, oh, don't worry, it's not going to burn your skin, but your uniform's going to fall off. So maybe I like you better naked because you don't have modesty, but Starfleet maybe says you do. And they have this back and forth where they talk about, well, why did you join Starfleet? And Data's like, well, it seemed like a good idea at the time. My skills are good. And he's like, no. You could have done so much more, but you choose a life of servitude. And Data starts questioning him like, well, why do you do what you do? He's like, well, because I can. And who's going to stop me? And it basically, it comes down to like a hostage syndrome because Data starts getting into Varia's head. Why do you serve him? He's like, because he rescued me. He got me off the streets. I'm like, yeah, but you live in servitude. And she tries to support Kivas by saying, well, why wouldn't I serve him? He's like, well, you're just as much a prisoner here as I am. You can just walk out that door and I can't. So eventually they hatch a plan of escape, but not before Data embarrasses him in front of this other alien collector guy. And he pulls out this prototype disruptor, kills you in an unbelievably slow fashion, which we do see later on in the episode.
Basically, he says it rips you apart, basically piece by piece, but slowly and enough that you feel every single neuron and pain receptor in your body feels like it's tearing itself apart at once because it is.
Yeah. So he points it at Varia and says, sit in the chair or she dies. And he starts to fire it. And he's like, okay. And he sits down in the chair. He's like, good. Now we understand each other. So Varia comes back later at night and says, okay, we are getting the hell out of here. They hack his safe. They get another Veron T because Kivas drops the hint. Oh, there were only 5 of these things made. I own 4 of them. I sleep with one under my pillow. And they go to the shuttlecraft, and Data's like, well, why don't I just call the Enterprise home? He's like, no, because the communications are locked up. But the shuttle can get us out of here. It'll send a distress beacon. Maybe we'll get out of here, but I'm not going to die here. Stuff goes wrong. Varia dies, and Kiva says, well, her death is on your hands.
She dies. He fires on her, and you see her slowly. She gets a hole in her belly that slowly tears her apart.
Yeah,
it's a bad death. Bad death.
These guns are apparently more painful and worse than Romulan disruptors.
Yeah, like it's a brutal way to go. And he says he takes the disruptor and he points at another one of his crewmen. And he's like, well, Data, if you do anything else, maybe I'll kill him. Maybe I'll kill him. You don't know. Get back in your chair. And Data's like, no, you're not going to destroy me because you want me. So Data picks up the disruptor and says, you're going to let me go. And Kivas calls his bluff and says, well, your only choice is to fire on me and murder me or do what I say. What are you going to do, android? Just then, the Enterprise arrives because they were able to solve the mystery that maybe he isn't who he says he is, and the idea that this planet was poisoned and just so happened to have the cure and just so happened to be in the right place at the right time. They track him down, whatever. They rescue Data. But when O'Brien transports him, he says to Riker, Commander, I'm reading a weapons discharge. I'm able to stop it before it comes through the transporter. And Riker goes, Data, what happened? We detected a weapons discharge. Data hands the disruptor to Riker. He says, well, sir, I don't know. Perhaps it was just a weapons malfunction. And Riker's like, sure. So Kivas is in the Enterprise brig, and he's saying to Data, oh, have you come to gloat? Am I supposed to repent and feel sorry? I'll get out and I'll get everything that I had back. And Data's like, no, you won't, because it's being returned to every single person you ever stole from. You're going to be alone and you're going to be poor. And that is what you deserve. And Kivas is like, you don't feel pleasure from this? And just as Data walks out of the brig, he's like, I don't, because I'm an android. So this is, in my opinion, one of the episodes where you start to see the emotional development of Data. The things were always there, but they are so heavily suppressed. He doesn't understand them. Like, Data was going to murder this guy, justifiably so, because Kivas was a psycho. Did he deserve to be evaporated? Probably not.
Even though he doesn't have an emotion chip that just does it for him, it's almost like his positronic matrix, like his AI is evolving to the point where it's creating its own emotions very slowly.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things where Data, could he have saved a life? Maybe, but it's an emotional growth moment for him. And this episode has always stuck with me, mostly because I love the performance of Saul Rubinek. He's such a charming bad guy because he's an unassuming dude. Like, you could beat the crap out of this guy in a bar fight, but he's going to give you just enough rope to hang yourself with. And he's going to make sure if you do anything to displease him, innocent people are going to suffer. And I love that sinister nature of him.
To me, this was the closest to an original series episode.
It does come across that way.
It's like, hey, what if we could get away with a little more menacing nature and a little more mature nature? But this feels like it would have fit right in season 2 of TOS.
And can I say that I have a slightly different take on it than you with like emotions? I don't think this has anything to do with Data slowly getting his own form of emotions. It's a logical choice that this guy, this collector, is going to continue to murder people just for Data being his own person. So logically speaking, the least amount of suffering will be generated by Data murdering him, taking him out of the equation to save other people's lives. I don't think it has anything to do with even like a pseudo emotion. This is entirely logical.
I don't know. There's just something about it, because I think over the course of early TNG, before he got the emotion chip, in my own headcanon, I think there was always something there, like the capacity to feel emotion was there. I mean, to say it was a chip is an easy out, I think.
Well,
I think the components would need to be laid down first so the chip can be installed.
So what you're trying to say is the ability is there, the instruction set isn't there to process it.
Yes.
But that all these slow encounters is what he's doing is it's slowly mapping itself, is what you're saying?
Yeah, like, because Data would, in my mind, be a person who can self-improve themselves. And he tried to do an emotion chip, as we see in, I think it's later on, and he goes out of control. Maybe
that's too much at once. Like, I agree a little more with Aaron. It's probably that, but because this was after the episode where Q makes him laugh, where he experiences his first real emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Does that start creating pathways?
Effect? Maybe, yeah. That's another good way to kind of look at it.
And again, I don't think it was written that way. I think it might have just, that's how I interpret it.
Mm-hmm. So I thought this was a fantastic episode. I'm very glad that I saw it now. I did do a little bit of background reading on this, and this episode actually has a rather tragic backstory to it. One of the actors who was supposed to play Kivas Fajo was I'm just going to pull up his name here because he unfortunately passed away. David Rappaport was supposed to play Kivas, and they did do a couple days of filming, but a couple days into the filming, somebody found him in his car with a tube attached from the exhaust, and he attempted to kill himself.
Doing well.
Yeah, so the actor was replaced because the director, Timothy Bond, knew Saul and said, hey, can you do me a Saul? And he's like, yeah, sure. I'm a huge fan. Anyway, sure. So unfortunately, the actor, David Rappaport, passed away from suicide 2 months later from a self-inflicted gunshot wound in Los Angeles. He died in a park on May 2nd in 1990. His death occurred 5 days before the episode was supposed to air.
Oh, he's a dude from Time Bandits.
Yeah. So that's something I didn't know. and it does put a different spin on this episode for me.
It's really unfortunate and sad. These things happen. It still sort of happens to today, and it's interesting. It would have been very interesting. It would have been very different. It actually would have been even more like a 60s episode had this actor been playing him, because he was a dwarf. He was 3 foot. Was it 3'10" or 3'11"? This would have had an even more 60s feel had he been cast.
And there are stuff on the season 3 Blu-ray. You can actually see the actor in the makeup, which is vastly different than what was shown on the show. And
that would give me very Clint Howard vibes if he was cast to do this. Like,
one of the greatest things this episode gave me, it's a quote from Hamlet, and Picard reads it when he gets the book back from Geordi after they're starting to divide Data's things. And he says, "He was a man, take him for all in all. I shall not look upon his like again." And that is a line in which William Shakespeare is discussing Hamlet as a goodly king, as someone who is really good and meant well in the world. And when you think about Data, all the stuff that he contributed to Starfleet, what he meant to his friends, and then Riker says the line, you know, for a person who had no emotions, he's certainly bringing it out in everybody. So that's what I really like about this too. There is an emotional punch in here, and you really see how close the Enterprise family is. Geordi, his best friend, never gave up on him. And there's something here too, and maybe, again, like Aaron, maybe I'm reading a little too much into this. Troy and Worf are in the turbo lift, and she says, "Worf, this is the second time you've had to replace somebody who's died. Your position is now at ops. How do you feel about it?" And Worf goes into the spiel. It's like, well, death occurs often on Klingon ships. He's like, yeah, but this isn't a Klingon ship. He was your friend. It's okay to talk about it. And for just a moment between Michael Dorn and Marina Sirtis, you get this, I would actually call it sexual tension, or a moment of tenderness where there is a moment of genuine connection, where I'm kind of glad you see a little bit of when you see Troy and Worf get together in season 7 in Parallels, which, by the way, if any of you take that episode, I will punch you in the face.
By the way, that was going to be my pick for season 7. That's my
like hell it is.
That's my favorite episode of the entire series.
That's top 5 for me. Top 5.
Okay, wow, fine. Really?
Because
that might be one of my least favorite episodes.
That's the first episode I ever saw.
Wow.
Yeah, that was one of my first episodes too. But
it doesn't hold up, by the way, Michael. So you can take it.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch it with fresh eyes and see what I think.
Okay, if you're taking that, I'm calling cause and effect right now for one of the other seasons.
Oh, Captain Frasier. So yeah, fair enough.
I'll finally get to pick the episode I wanted to pick.
So which one of us gets to take on when the cast of Frasier gets to command Voyager? Anyway, so yeah, we have taken up a lot of your time today, folks. So like I said, sorry for the long wait between episodes of Future Imperfect. We are going to be getting these out on a more regular basis here on Future Imperfect. Hopefully,
and
Steve.
There are so many good ones in this season that
it's a turning point.
Season 3 and season 4 are gold. They're just gold.
This is really where it picked up, right? Like,
yeah,
I'm just scrolling through the episode titles, looking at them, and
what would have been your alternate pick? And I'll tell you mine to give you a second to think. The Offspring. I love that episode. Yeah, because there's something about Data creating a daughter, and Data's
is amazing.
Yeah, Lol saying,
amazing.
I love you, Dad or Father, and Data's like, I know, but he can't reciprocate that. Not yet. And it's heartbreaking. And I really, really, really like that they gave Brent Spiner a chance to do more. And yeah, that would have been my pick.
Mine? Oh, just looking at the titles. No. Matter of perspective, maybe.
Booby Trap for me. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
There's lots of good ones.
Okay. Yeah. Mine was either going to be. Oh yeah, Booby Trap's good. You know what? Matter of perspective, I just like the premise as well. Commander Riker is accused of murder, and the holodeck is used to reconstruct the events from different perspectives. That's like my jam right there. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, there are so many good ones here.
Mm-hmm. So
do we want to take this moment to maybe pick something from season 4?
I would have to look at a list.
I will tell you right now, we're not doing Best of Both Worlds Part 2.
Nope, absolutely not. I actually might take the one that happens right after Best of Both Worlds Part 2, where Picard goes home to France.
Family?
Yeah,
that's
because
a good one.
That's
you can take that one. Okay.
Yeah.
You take that one. I'm going to assume Aaron could probably already pick one right now.
I love Drumhead, but boy,
I could probably tell that Steve's going to pick Cupid, maybe.
Reunion is also good. But Drumhead is so dramatic. I don't know.
Drumhead is... Oh, yeah. I know that one. That one's good. Just reading the...
Directed by Jonathan Frakes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a really good episode. I'd probably stick with with Drumhead.
No. Devil's Due. Data's... Oh. Data's Day.
But Offspring is solid.
Okay, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to pick Future Imperfect.
That's kind of perfect, actually.
I mean, it is the title of our podcast, right? So,
yeah. So, once again, folks, we definitely want to thank you for joining us here on ThisWeekInGeek.net as we continue the epic voyage of the USS Future Imperfect. And as always, if you want to get in touch with the show, you can reach us feedback at ThisWeekInGeek.net. That email goes directly to Alex and then gets distributed to the team. You can also contact us on Twitter at ThisWeekInGeek.net. Alex does have primary control of that account, but we always do love hearing back from our fans. So as we begin to disembark, leaving the safety of Federation space and perhaps heading out into the Shackleton Expanse. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can check out the role-playing game from Modifius, because it's a cool thing, and me and Aaron talked about it a while back. So for Future Imperfect, starting with my first officer, we have been
Alex.
And reporting from Science,
I'm Aaron Pollyea.
All right, guys, I've been Lieutenant Commander Mike the Birdman, and until next time, live long and prosper.